I still remember the smell of the old car that day, the faint stench of gasoline mixed with my mother's favorite jasmine perfume. I was only 6 years old, small enough that my feet dangled above the floorboard, swinging nervously as I hugged my worn-out teddy bear. My father was unusually quiet, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. My mother hummed softly, not her usual lullaby, but a shaky, restless tune that I didn't recognize. We were driving to my grandfather's house, or so they said, just for a few days. My mother had whispered when I asked why we were leaving home. "Your grandpa misses you. He'll be so happy to see you." Her words sounded sweet, but even at 6, I could sense something wasn't right. Parents weren't supposed to whisper with trembling voices. Parents weren't supposed to look at each other with that kind of heaviness in their eyes. When we pulled up to Grandpa's countryside house, the world felt different. The air smelled of pine and soil, and the creaking gate groaned as Dad pushed it open. Grandpa was waiting outside, leaning on his wooden cane, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw me. "Ah, my little one," he said, kneeling to hug me. His arms felt strong and warm, like a shield from everything I didn't understand. For a moment I forgot the unease. I was happy to see him, but then it happened. After Grandpa led me inside, my parents exchanged a glance. I didn't know it then, but it was the last time they would look at me as their responsibility. "We'll be back soon," Dad said, patting my head awkwardly. "Be good, okay, soon," Mom echoed, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Her lips were cold, her eyes darted everywhere except at me. Before I could ask when soon was, they were gone. The sound of the car engine faded down the dirt road until it disappeared completely. At first, I didn't understand. I kept waiting. Every day, I sat by the gate, clutching my teddy bear, certain their car would appear at any moment. I would ask Grandpa, "When are Mommy and Daddy coming back?" He would pause, his eyes soft but sad, and say, "They'll come when they can, little one. For now, you're safe here." But soon, stretched into weeks, and weeks into months. My birthdays passed with only Grandpa's cake, always too sweet, but made with love. School plays came and went, with me scanning the crowd for faces that never appeared. Each time the phone rang, my heart leapt, but it was never them. I began to realize the truth in slow, painful fragments. They hadn't left me with Grandpa because of a trip or an emergency. They had left me because they didn't want me. I remember the night the truth finally sank in. I was lying in bed, the window open to the chirping of crickets. Grandpa thought I was asleep, but I overheard him talking to a neighbor in the kitchen. "They just dropped the boy here and never came back," he said, his voice low and heavy. No calls, no letters, nothing. What kind of parents abandon their own child? I buried my face in the pillow, hot tears soaking the fabric. The word abandon echoed in my mind like a curse I couldn't escape. From that night on, something changed inside me. The innocence of waiting for them faded. I stopped sitting by the gate. I stopped asking when they'd come back. A part of me hardened, though I didn't fully understand it then. At 6 years old, I had already learned what betrayal felt like. But I wasn't alone. Grandpa was there. Every time I cried, he sat by my bed, telling me stories from his youth, stories about courage, resilience, and survival. He would say, "Blood doesn't always make family, little one. Love does, and as long as I breathe, you'll never be alone." And in that promise, I found my first flicker of hope. Life with Grandpa wasn't easy, but it was real. The countryside was a world far from the noise of the city, filled with the sound of roosters at dawn and the scent of fresh soil after rain. For a child abandoned too early, those little things became the fabric of survival. Grandpa was not a man of many words, but his actions spoke louder than anything my parents had ever said. He would rise before the sun, his back already bent from years of labor, and still managed to cook me breakfast before heading out to the fields. "Eat well," he'd always say, sliding a plate toward me, "so you can grow strong." At first, I was restless. I wanted toys, cartoons, the warm touch of a mother's hand, the playful laughter of a father. But as days turned to years, I found that Grandpa's rough hands, calloused from years of hard work, carried more love than any gift could. He taught me that family wasn't about who brought you into this world, but who stayed by your side when everyone else walked away. School was tough. Children can be cruel when they sense a weakness, and I was the kid whose parents had disappeared. Some whispered that my parents had died. Others said they ran away because they didn't want me. I tried not to let it show, but their words stuck like thorns. Whenever I came home with red eyes, Grandpa never asked questions. He would simply sit me down, hand me a slice of his toast, wheat cake, and tell me about how he had fought his own battles when he was young. You can't control what people say, he told me once as we watched the stars, but you can control who you become. Let their words sharpen you, not break you. Those words carved themselves into my heart. As the years passed, I learned more than just resilience. Grandpa made sure I never lacked discipline. He taught me how to plant seeds, how to repair a broken fence, how to rid the weather by looking at the sky. But he also sat with me over school books late at night, pushing me to study harder, reminding me that knowledge was a key no one could take away. Your parents left you, yes, he said one evening, his eyes misty but his voice steady. But don't let that be your story's end. Let it be the beginning. I clung to his guidance like a lifeline. And slowly I began to change. I became one of the top students in school, not because I was naturally gifted, but because I worked harder than anyone else. Every late night study session, every skipped playtime, every moment of loneliness fueled me. While other kids had parents attending school meetings, I had Grandpa standing tall with his cane, his presence quiet but proud. Teachers often praised me, but I saw the pride glowing in Grandpa's eyes, and that was worth more than any certificate. Still, the wounds of abandonment never fully faded. Every birthday, I wondered if maybe this year my parents would return. Every milestone, I thought, if they could see me now, maybe they'd be proud. But the years rolled on in silence. No phone calls, no letters, no sign of regret. They had erased me from their lives, and the only family I had was the man who refused to let me drown in their absence. When I turned 16, Grandpa gave me something that changed everything. He pulled out a wooden box from under his bed and handed me a stack of old savings books. "This is yours," he said firmly. "Every coin I saved for you, for your future. Don't ever think you're starting with nothing. You've already got everything you need. Your mind, your heart, and the will to fight." I couldn't stop the tears. For years I had wondered why I wasn't good enough for my parents. But in that moment, I realized something important. It wasn't about me not being enough. It was about them not being capable of love, and that realization lit a fire in me. By the time I graduated high school, I wasn't just the boy who had been abandoned. I was the young man who had survived it, transformed it, and risen stronger because of it. Grandpa's faith in me became the backbone of my existence. Yet deep down, I always carried one question like a shadow I couldn't shake. What if they came back one day? Would I crumble? Would I forgive? Or would I finally stand tall against the people who had broken me? I didn't know the answer then, but I would soon find out. Because life has a cruel way of testing you when you least expect it. Savings, along with my own relentless drive, had carried me through college. I studied harder than I ever thought possible, fueled not just by ambition, but by a need to prove that abandonment did not define me. When my classmates went out partying, I stayed in libraries, working part-time jobs to cover what Grandpa couldn't. While others worried about weekend trips, I thought about how every step forward was a way of honoring the man who had raised me. Grandpa would often tell neighbors, "This boy will make something of himself, mark my words," and he was right. After graduation, I landed a good job, and eventually, with enough experience and courage, I started my own business. It wasn't glamorous at first, a small office, sleepless nights, endless setbacks, but I kept going. Each obstacle felt like another test, and I refused to fail. By my mid-20s, I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Grandpa and I lived modestly, but comfortably. I had bought new furniture for his old house, repaired the roof, and made sure he never had to lift more than his cane. Watching him sit on the porch, sipping tea, proud of what we had built together, was worth more than anything money could buy. But time is cruel. Even the strongest oak must eventually fall. One evening, after dinner, Grandpa leaned back in his chair, smiling at me as though he was seeing me for the first time all over again. "You've made me proud," he whispered. That night, he passed peacefully in his sleep. Losing him felt like losing the only anchor I had in this world. For days, I couldn't breathe without feeling the weight of grief pressing down on me. But when the will was read and I saw that he had left everything, the house, the land, the savings, to me, I realized something. Grandpa had trusted me to carry forward not just his belongings, his legacy. I swore that I would honor him. For a while, life settled into a quiet rhythm. Work, home, memories. I thought the worst was behind me. But then, 15 years after the day they had left me at Grandpa's gate, my parents returned. It started with a knock on the door. When I opened it, I froze. Time had changed them, but not enough that I couldn't recognize the faces that had haunted my childhood. My father's hair was thinner, his shoulders stooped. My mother's eyes, once soft, now carried the weight of years I didn't know about. "My child," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks as if she had the right to call me that. I stood there in silence, my hands trembling but not from joy. From rage, from disbelief, they talked as if nothing had happened, as if they had only been gone a few weeks. They spoke of mistakes and hard times, of how they had struggled financially, of how they had meant to come back but life got in the way. Life got in the way. 15 years of silence. 15 birthdays missed. 15 years of watching from the gate, crying into my pillow, carrying the scars of abandonment, and all they had to say was that life got in the way. But their return wasn't about me. It wasn't about regret or love. I realized that soon enough. 2 weeks later, I received a notice. They were suing me. Suing me, they claimed Grandpa's property should rightfully belong to them, as his children. That I, the grandchild they had discarded, had no rightful claim. They wanted the house, the land, the inheritance, all of it. I remember the way my hands shook as I held the papers, the bitter taste rising in my throat. They hadn't come back to apologize. They hadn't come back to make amends. They had come back to take. The betrayal was almost unbearable. Once, as a child, I had cried for them, begged for them, wished for them. Now, as an adult, I realized the truth. They had never seen me as their child. Not then, not now. But I wasn't the same helpless little boy they had abandoned at Grandpa's gate. This time, I wasn't going to be the one left broken. This time, I would fight. When the lawsuit officially began, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Every memory of abandonment surged back, the empty birthdays, the broken promises, the image of their car disappearing down Grandpa's dirt road. But instead of drowning in those memories, I let them sharpen me. My parents underestimated me. They thought the little boy they had left behind still existed. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man forged by struggle, discipline, and love that had come not from them, but from the man they had abandoned me with. The courtroom became my battlefield. Their lawyer painted them as parents who had faced hardship, who deserved their father's inheritance. They spun stories about poverty, illness, and how they had trusted Grandpa to raise me until they could come back. Their words dripped with manipulation, as though 15 years of silence could be erased by crocodile tears. But I had the truth, and I had evidence. I presented Grandpa's will, clear and unquestionable, signed and witnessed, leaving everything to me. I showed the court records that proved they had never once tried to contact me, no phone calls, no visits, no letters. Neighbors testified, remembering how they had vanished, how Grandpa had been the only parent I'd ever really had. My teachers spoke about how he had attended every meeting, every event, while my parents remained nothing but ghosts. Piece by piece, I dismantled their lies. I will never forget the look on my mother's face when the judge asked her, "Why did you never attempt to reclaim custody of your child? Why no letters, no support, no visits in 15 years?" She stammered, fumbled, looked at the floor. My father tried to bluster his way through, but his excuses fell flat. For once they were the ones cornered, and I felt something unexpected, not just anger but power. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the abandoned child begging for scraps of affection. I was the one holding them accountable. The verdict came swiftly. The inheritance was mine, as Grandpa had wished. The court recognized my parents' abandonment for what it was, neglect. Their case was dismissed, They left the courtroom with nothing but shame, but my revenge didn't end with the legal victory. No, the sweetest revenge was in how I chose to live after. I could have screamed at them, thrown their betrayal back in their faces, let my bitterness consume me. But instead, I looked at them one last time, the two people who had given me life but nothing more, and I said only this: you had your chance. 15 years ago, you left me with nothing, and I survived. I don't need you now. I never did. I walked away, leaving them in silence. That was the moment I truly understood Grandpa's wisdom. Revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about proving that they no longer had power over me. It was about living, thriving, and carrying on without them. I returned to Grandpa's house, my house now, and stood at the gate where I had once waited for parents who would never come. Only this time I wasn't waiting. I was moving forward. The boy who had once cried at that gate was gone. The man who stood there now had built a life on his own terms. Some nights, I still think about them. I wonder if they regret it, if they feel the weight of what they lost. But then I remember something Grandpa once told me as we sat watching the stars. Some people throw away diamonds thinking they're stones. Their loss doesn't make the diamond any less precious. I was that diamond. They had thrown me away, and I had found my shine without them. So I kept living. Building, thriving, not for revenge anymore, but for myself. That was the sweetest justice of all.